I'm Clint, and we're going to be looking at the process of creating images for magic this episode of Swatches. This video isn't going to be a recording of me doing the painting process in real time for the magic images, because that spans multiple days and the video would simply be too huge. What we'll do instead is just have a walkthrough of the creation process, starting with the description that I get from the company, and then going through the sketches, the colors, and the final. Alright, well, I've picked out three sort of just randomly that I think gives a good overview of the approach that I use. So let's jump into the first one. One of the most popular images, at least game-wise, is Syncopate from the cards that I've done. And let's pull up the brief. Now, the brief is the description that the artist would get from the company, and it tells you this sort of information: the name that they give it, the size of the image. Usually, the size stays the same, unless you're doing maybe a promotion card that has a full image art. Anyway, size, when the sketches due, when the artists do. They're usually pretty good with time-wise. Probably 3 weeks before the sketch needs to go in, about another 3 weeks before the final. We know what color the card is, where it's supposed to be located, and a description of the scene that needs to be going on. Now, this is pretty standard amount of description. Some of them maybe a little less, maybe some a little more. So in this case, we have in the Ravnica set, place located in the Ravnica street. It's a blue spell. Show a demon or mage. That's a particular guild that they're from. Now it's saying male or female, see demon costuming, page 144 to 146. In this case, what it's referring to is the style guide. Now, when Wizards decides to introduce a new world, or go back to another world, in this case, the Ravnica, then they create a style guide for the artist to use. Now, this is a sort of reference book that all the artists get to use. And it has images created in-house by their team, or they subbed it out to somebody, that has, in this case, the Deemer characters in that guild, that group of people. They show, okay, this is Deemer design. They use leather, they use a lot of blacks, they have triple points on their leather, and all the visual iconic things for that group of people. And that way, all the artists can draw the same group of people and have a consistent look, because they're all basing it on the same thing. Now, generally, you would not copy any one thing from the style guide, but in this case, the art director is simply saying, hey, refer to these pages because that has the basic costuming that this character needs to follow. Now, if they are casting a counter spell, perhaps you see him or her from the waist up. He or she makes a dismissive, sweeping motion with one hand, causing a bolt of angry red fire to disperse harmlessly into bluish sparks. Demon Mage, it's a counter magic. And they usually have mood, contemptuous, dismissive in this case. Now, this tells us quite a bit, but this also doesn't tell us a lot. It doesn't tell us the time of day it is. It doesn't tell us the composition of the image. It doesn't tell us even what colors to use, or what color scheme to use. Although, because it's a blue spell, we probably need to work in the blue color. We do not know if the character is male or female. We do not know the specifics of their costuming. So there's a lot of things to do. Aside from that, you have the dismissive, sweeping motion with one hand. Sounds descriptive, but what does that mean? When you sit down to start drawing that, that could be a lot of different things. And we'll take a look at that. Now, one other point to note, and some people have asked me about this in the issue of creating art for magic, and that is, no, I do not know the mechanics of the card before it comes out. In this case, I could gather that this is a counter spell. Also in this case, this is an update image to an older card, so I have a much better idea of what this card would do. But as a rule, artists do not know what the mechanics of the card will be, the rarity of the card will be. That's what we learned from the brief. And the first thing that I did, let's see, which file am I opening? Stages. Okay, let's open this up in Photoshop and push things around here for a second. Now let's back up. Compiled the stages of the creation of the image into one file, so we can just flip layer by layer and look at the timeline of its creation. And the first thing I did was just open my Moleskine sketchbook and start doing some sketches. This, of course, is just a scan from the sketchbook. And generally, I work on my compositions and character design in my sketchbook and not digitally. It just gives me a chance to get back to the pencil a little bit. And I like working out thumbnails in pencil more than I like to do it digitally. So here along the top, you can see the first sketches that I have is syncopate, just working out the basic composition. Now, the original idea when I read the brief for the dismissive hand motion was one kind of going like this, like, no, just move along. And which I coupled with the idea that maybe they were sipping a drink, had a glass of wine or something, and it was going to be a man. And they were just kind of saying no with their hand. I went along with that for a little while, but I didn't like it so much. So I kept looking for ideas, and that's when I came up with the memory of T-1000 in Terminator 2, where at the very end of the movie, the shape-shifting Terminator is almost blasted into the molten metal and turns to Sarah Connor and goes like this. And it's just so condescending. It's so belittling, like, oh, you got close, but playtime's over. Now, no, that's what I want to do. That's fun. I want to do that. So, working on that, first one up, idea of doing that, put the little finger in there, still holding the glass of wine, but ended up getting rid of that and went on with the idea of it's more of an attitude thing. So she's leaning forwards, waving her finger. Okay, so that's just kind of the progression of idea. After that, moving over into Photoshop, pulled up some took some reference photos of myself in that similar position with my webcam to get the idea of the body. Started sketching out the body. Did some sketches in the sketchbook. You can see here. Also think that did a couple more up here. Yeah, same basic stuff. Now the character was going to be bald to begin with. A lot of the people from that guild were supposed to be bald, so I thought, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Bald chick. I haven't done that before. So she was going to be bald, as you can see with these sketches there. And that's why the sketch here has her being bald. I had pulled in references for the leather because it's supposed to be black and kind of shiny, and just get an idea of how to work that. So work up the quick color. Now I worked it in black and white, did a quick color layer over top of that, and this is the sketch that I sent in to the art director. They liked the direction of it, but said, we have too many bald people, so we need you to add hair to her. I was like, okay. So, going back into it, this would be the next update. I'll flip back and forth there and kind of see what's going on. Dropped in a background, used a couple of photo elements just to give myself a general perspective and say, okay, here's some architectural elements, and then start modifying those out. Otherwise, pulled up some references for some hair, some stylish, kind of choppy hair. Got some hair in there, modified, more details. Again, just moved it back to black and white because this was very fast colors. I just wanted the art director to have the basic idea of what the color scheme was going to look like. Then back to black and white and start rebuilding it. Now we start moving back into the color. Everything's pretty choppy at this point. I'm going to move these over, get a little more room. I don't think I need these guys. Okay. And then I get the idea that the shield itself would be very blue. The fire is warm on the outside. And moving. In my process, what I generally do is I work up to a point and then I flatten it down. And then I start kind of building off that point and then I flatten it down. And at this point, this is where I got to, and I was like, okay, this is the direction I want to go. Now let's flatten it down and start correcting back up. Used one of Photoshop's, what was it, glass filter along the edges here to give just some distortion for the field. I try not to use the filters too much from Photoshop because they kind of can get a stigma visually. But I thought it would work in this case, sort of a watery field. Now, another thing that I want to do is I tinted everything inside the bubble to be very blue. That way, you get the idea that she is inside of a particular area. Everything inside of that is safe. Everything outside of that is going to be very hot from the fire. And it just creates a visual distinction between the two areas. So, that's that. Next stage, I did find this fire. I think it was on DeviantArt. Somebody had a reference photo, stock photo of this. And I use that sort of a basis just to look at, okay, how is the dynamics of a fire spell coming in? And started blocking in the fire. Just glow areas, linear dodge, I believe was the layer. Start mashing those in. Since it's hitting the shield and the dispersing, having a lot of flare bits flying off of it. One of the other things here is adding a bumpy edge to the shield itself, adding some reflection of the fire onto the shield. And then the last stage would be adding some blue sparks. I believe the brief actually called that there would be some blue sparks. So added some blue sparks in there. Those are nice. Just the radiating lines helps draw your attention back to the center. Did some detail work along the edges of the fire to give more life to that. And that would be the finish of Syncopate. So let's close her, move along to the next one. No. Oh yeah, I'll mention this too. When I start my sketches, I usually do my thumbnail drawings without any reference. I just want to get the basic composition, get the basic idea down. But once I move out of the sketchbook and into Photoshop, then I start collecting references for anything that I feel like I need. Now, in this case, this is you can see here a collection of different things. Some of it's metal, how does metal reflect on stuff? I want to have it there in case I need to reference it. Have lighting, again, more metal, lighting stuff. I grabbed stuff from all over the place. Needed the character to be kneeling, so, pull up pose references. Some things I get because it's a artistic quality. It's like I want to have that artistic quality. Some of it is actual pose, lighting, etc. reference. Okay, now on Stolen Identity, let's pull up the brief here. Same basic size, Demer. Show a Boros knight kneeling within a magical symbol on a slick stone floor. The symbol is done in the Demer style. The knight looks grim. Lights coming from above. The symbol glows faintly blue. Instead of the usual Boros color hues of red and white, this Boros Knight clone has murky blue accents on his clothing and armor while retaining the Boros styling. So this guy has the armor of one guild with the coloring of another one since he was magically duplicated. Alright, let's open stages. Now the first idea came up with, zoom out a little bit, this was the first draft. and just a needling knight within a magical circle, a light coming from above. Thought two swords were kind of cool, hadn't done that before. And I was about to send this in, but I don't know, I just felt like it was a little too on the nose. It was just too straightforward, and I wanted to do something a little different, different perspective, a different something. So I started again, and I actually went through this beginning process several times to try to get the lighting right, and this is the one that ended up working. I started with this. Now, I came up with a pose. I referenced myself again, used a webcam, shot myself. Came up with a pose, lightly put that in. And one of the problems that I was having is that I was starting with a white canvas and trying to paint the shadows into it, and it just wasn't working. So I went in reverse. I started with a black canvas and started painting the light into it, because in my mind it was more important about what the light was hitting and not hitting rather than where the shadows were. Now, the head was the key point. That was the jumping off point for this one, and that was inspired by this, which was a Punisher Warzone. I never did see that, but I remembered this poster and this very minimal lighting that they had on his face there. And so I actually grabbed that, just copied that out, and put it in here, and ended up painting it out. But it stuck in there for a while as my direction of, this is the lighting, now I need that lighting to sort of be carried out through the rest of the image. So I put that in there, blocked in the pose, and just started putting light where I wanted light to be cinematically. And it didn't have to be 100% accurate, just accurate enough that you would buy it. Okay, so basic one, I wanted the eyes to glow. This is a magical creature, he's just been summoned. And I wanted I didn't want the eyes to be like in the Punisher where it's just completely black. So add that, just add some more lighting, add some smoky stuff coming from the eyes. He has a white tabard thing coming down. Add that, and just slowly adding light. All the background here I kept at a medium value because I wanted the white areas to remain the brightest areas. I didn't want to compete that by making the background as bright as they were. So just a real sort of subtle lighting in the background, but enough so that the silhouettes of the darks can show up. Continuing on, adding the beginning of the magic ring, adding some details, breaking away from just the curved edge to the, the spalder on the shoulder. And the idea is that the Boros armor has a sun pattern design built into it that was made clear in the style guide. And so I took that idea and I made it into the spikes that go around his neck and around his head, is that this sun pattern radiates out. And then just continuing that on along the edge down there. Continuing with the details, making his hair a bit different, giving it longer, making it a bit more mangled, and adjusting the lighting on the nose. Didn't want that. Adding some basic detail and indication of magic around there. Sun design on the tabard. Then you have the haze light coming in from above. Now this is the sketch that I sent in. Now generally I try to do a sketch, start and sent in one day. I can't remember if I did that. I want to think that I took 2 days on this one because I did the first version the first day and I thought I was going to send that in, but got up the next morning and didn't like it. So I did this and sent that in. They liked it, so I would come back to the image after I heard back from the art director. Now the next stage would be start adding color. Now the color at this stage, I've already worked in quite a bit. There's several hours going on in between these stages. I just didn't have the files. Like I said, I compressed it and started over a couple of times in between these two stages. But one idea was that having been magically summoned, I kind of imagined him steaming with the heat of the magic or whatever. So I added all this steam coming off of him and shining in the light. Just thought it was kind of cool. One feedback from the art director in this case was the need to have a crown thing. I forgot what they called it. Anyway, the crown thing. And I honestly didn't want to put it in there because I liked this dynamic. It goes dark, light, dark. The head is very clear. The shapes are very defined. And you can get it very small and it's still very readable. When you start adding things in there and breaking up that light and dark pattern, then visually it starts breaking down. It's not as readable. It gets more cloudy. And the simplicity of the lighting situation, it's not simple anymore. So, used a color overlay layer, I don't recall. Start adding color back into it, adding some details. Blocked in a basic crown thing. Wasn't real happy with this version of it though. So I tried adding it and making it more like a chrome. But I didn't like it. I didn't like it sticking off beyond the top of the head. It seemed like it took too much away from the face. So I played it down a little bit, made it smaller. Didn't make it so chrome. Still, again, just adjusting the lights along the rest of the image. Did some work, found some references for blades. Did some metal work along the blades. And got the idea that the sun designs and the armor would glow blue in the shadow areas. They wouldn't show up in the lit areas because the overhead light would wash them out. Did that, and then finish it up. A couple of final things is I didn't feel like the armor was big enough to reflect the Boros style of the armor. So the chest and the shoulder area were expanded. The glowing blue designs added throughout the rest of the image. It just gives some nice detail. If those weren't there, then there's not much detail. There's not much to tell us the forms or the shapes of what's going on in the shadows. So the blue helps to do that. We have a better idea of what's going on there. And adding the designs of the magic around the scene. Now personally, I think I should have probably stuck with these eyes with the glowing up and down. But I ended up going with these. So, you always look back and say, I probably should have stuck with one earlier version, something earlier about it, and not have changed it. But you learn from it and you go to the next one. You can't always go back and fix it. The fact is, once you finish it, you've got a commission for a next one, so you just move on. That brings up, let me say this, just as a side note. I used to be really nervous about magic images when I first started. And I'm not nearly as much so now. But that's because it's how often you do it. If this is something that you do every day, this is something you've done a bunch of times, then it's not that fresh. It's not that big a deal. But when you first start, you're probably going to overthink things a lot, and you're going to second guess yourself a lot. But more you do it, more you'll start being able to just kind of trust your judgment and know what works, what doesn't work, when to trust your gut, when not to. And that's a side thing. Okay, no, don't save. And the last one we'll take a look at is the most recent one that I've released, or Magic released, which is Quickling. Now, a note on that is that there is about a 10-month lag from when I finish a piece and when that piece is released by Magic, and it's only after a piece released by Magic that I am allowed to show it. So anything that I show you guys, I probably finished almost a year beforehand. Uh, Now, in this case, oh, I need to show you the brief first. Okay, in the brief, it's a blue creature in the woods. Show a female fairy carrying a coiled length of magical rope. She's kind of tough. Maybe she has a sword. She has an insect motif to her. Dragonfly, wasp, butterfly, something like that. Magical creature. This is another thing. I get a preliminary title to the Magic cards. In this case, it was called Fairy Tangler. Now, they rename the card after I get it. So, the game mechanics guys figure out what the card needs to do mechanics-wise. That is given to the art director. The art director thinks of a scene and character that would convey that. I get that description. I give that back to them in the final image. And then they hand it to the guys who write the flavor text and come up with the final title. Then the card comes out. So, okay. Now, this was not a drawing for the Fairy Tangler, which was later renamed Quickly. This was a image that I had created for a previous Magic image, but this design was rejected and we went with something else. But I always liked the basic pose of this this dude here. And when I read the description, I immediately thought of this Fairy Tangler in that similar position. And so I kind of used this as my starting point, the character, not all this background stuff. So when I started doing my initial drawing, it was based on that idea of, okay, here's the fairy here from that side view, the arms back, holding the rope across here. And I had the idea that maybe it wasn't so much a insect motif as it was a insect and fauna. So she has like, you know, twigs coming out of the top of her head and that sort of thing. Initial sketch in the sketchbook, and then I refined the sketch in Photoshop, or resketch it, and come up with the idea of petals. The head goes into petals, flower petals, as it goes up. Those petals are also used along the arm, on the torso, and then some sort of butterfly wings there, the rope. Okay. Went into adding the basic lighting, tones. Wanted the light just coming across the face. Now, as a rule of thumb, only put light where you want people to look. I mean, it's kind of simple, but highlight the things that are important. This leg, not important. I mean, it needs to be there. She needs to have legs, but I'm not going to highlight that up because it's a non-point. So, focused on the face, continued working it out. This is the sketch that I sent in. Some sketches black and white, some sketches in color. This is what I had. Obviously, it's pretty rough, but it gives the art director enough idea of the direction that this is going to be going in. Okay, so they okayed that, and I went back, started with it, and started going with color. Pretty good jump there. Probably missing a couple of stages, but start adding the color and overlay layers, blocking that in, adding some textures around, cleaning up the head. Now, I generally start cleaning up the head and starting with drawing the head first, because if I can get that right, then I can relax about the rest of the image. There's not much worse than putting in a lot of time and everything looks great and you just can't nail the face. So I say nail the face first, and then the rest of it can just coast along. Now I did want to do this at first, which was kind of having sapling sort of branches coming out of the head. I later changed my idea on that and take it out because it's too much of a standalone thing. That's the only place it showed up, if it had been repeated in the back, on the arms, if it could be used somewhere else also, then it would be a repeating theme. But as is, it was standalone and it was like, otherwise it's just too confusing. Doing that. Got a photo of myself in that pose. Lit it the way that I needed it so that I could have some good references in order to get the torso painted up more realistically. Okay. Now in the face was kind of inspired by the contestant Laura on Face Off, Sci-Fi Channel's makeup effects competition. Just the way that she used very subtle changes, graduations in color from areas to areas on the skin tones. So it's like things would get darker or lighter around the eyes, and just these subtle changes in tone that graduate from areas to areas. And you can look at her work and you see that. And in this case, I try to add that a little bit. The whole nose gets a bit pinker as you go to it. The cheekbones, where it has kind of the spiky cheekbones, is more yellow. Like maybe more of the bone is showing through. The skin is thinner, so it's not as colorful. The arm gets more blue and darker as it goes towards the petals. Of course, it becomes more blue as it goes up to the petals on the head. So just these subtle changes and graduations in skin tone as it heads towards different areas of the body. Okay, adding more details. Got the idea to add markings. Just seemed like if she is sort of an insect fauna creature, then insects and fauna have a lot of markings. So I wanted to play that into it and just have some, I don't know what kind of markings these are, just spotty sort of markings that would help her blend into our surroundings. Obviously blocked in the wings end up being some photo elements, some painting. It's a mixture. So put those in. Adding in some background. Needed some background lights going on. And it was pretty close to being finished here, but the last thing I like to do is just zoom out from the picture. In this case, if you zoom out from this, the whole thing is a little flat. Not enough contrast, not enough vibrancy to the color. And so I would make these changes, and you can see even when it's small, that helps it pop out more. Involves just darkening up the ends of the petals and brightening the inside as if maybe they kind of have a glow. I kind of like the flatness of this, and if it was a bigger image and if this was just for myself, I might have left it that way. But the fact is, sometimes you need to make adjustments depending on how the image is going to be used. And in this case, the image is going to be about this big on a card, and that means that things need to be visually very readable. Contrasts need to be overdone a little bit. Colors need to be overdone a little bit. Compositions need to be fairly straightforward. So that's what this is about, just cleaning it up, detailing it. And that was the final that I sent in. And they were pretty happy with that, except for one thing. And the art director noted, this is a creature that has the flying ability. And in Magic, any creature with flying ability needs to be shown with wings. And in this case, the wings are just a little too easy to miss. If the card was small and you just glanced at it, you would notice probably the shell things on the back. And carapace, I think is what they're called. But the wings itself could be lost sort of in the detail of the trees. And she said, could you make the wings more visible? I said, sure. Okay. So I made this adjustment. I said, okay, well, let's make them show up by doing a couple of things. One is let's make them blue. And that way they have a contrast of color against the green in the background. And let's make them have a glow. The glow, I actually have a little glow you can see here along the back. Where the back was normally silhouetted, the glow comes through and gives a nice little atmosphere there. Also along the top of the back there. I personally like that change. I'm glad they noticed that, and I think it adds a lot more to the image, kind of adds this magicalness to it. And that was the final that I sent in. Let me just give it a close-up in case you want to see the face. So there's face of just big black eyes, going all black. Little petite nose, no eyebrows. If you want to make somebody slightly odd looking, slightly alien, but not too weird, just take out the eyebrows. And that is a great way to make somebody just slightly unsettling. I believe it's the Lord of the Rings, the character Grimtongue? Who was it? The advisor to the Rohan King? A real sleazy sort of dude. They took off his eyebrows. And you might not notice it at first, but you're looking at the guy and you're just like, that something's wrong with that guy. That guy's creepy. No eyebrows. So took those off just to make it a little less human. And the subtle skin tones. Yeah. So that was fun. I personally like this character. And that was the final until I got word that it was going to be included in Spectrum art book. Was it Spectrum 21, I believe. And that gave me the chance to do a couple of little updates that I wanted to do but didn't spend the time to do the first time. And that is, if you look along here, I had missed this, where the colors don't match. It goes from a green to a yellow. The edges along the rope aren't good. There's some spots where the layer blends didn't work out right. That sort of thing. So I did a slightly updated version of it for Spectrum to be included in the book, where I cleaned up the edges. You can see that. Flip back and forth. I added sort of a magical dust coming off the rope. I increased the hand size by about 10%. See that along here. And I rebalanced the colors in the image. I've been looking at this version for so long that I became sort of blind to the fact that this is overly green. Your eyes will naturally color balance what you're seeing, and I didn't realize how green this was. So in this version, I added a lot more red back into the image, red and violet, so that it's more accurately color balanced now. There's still a lot of green in the background. She's still blue, but the skin tone is almost warm at this stage. So that's the image going into Spectrum. But again, one more time, I get to adjust this image because it gets option to be a playmat for the Salt Lake City Grand Prix coming up next month as of the time of this video. And playmats are much longer horizontally than magic images are. So I had the choice to have my image cropped to about like this for the playmat, which I wasn't a big fan of, or increase the scene out, which is the option that I took, don't crop. So I created this version of the image, which is longer. You can see that the image normally stopped just right there by the rope. And here I add a bit on either end. Currently this is where it stands, but who knows? Maybe I'll end up adjusting it for something else. But that is the overview of the creation process of 3 different images for magic. And I hope you've enjoyed this. Maybe sometime I'll make another one, go through some more images. But as always, if you want a particular topic covered, then just leave me a note, suggestion down below. If you have art questions that you'd like addressed, put those down in there. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. It's kind of a longer video than I intended to do, but thank you very much for watching, and keep drawing.